Well, the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain has regular meetings and meetups, and the 29th of November, we're having a comedy night.
So Heb is doing the music before, and I think that would be a good opener for us to
I'm in an old pub on London's Fleet Street where around a dozen men and women are planning a comedy night with a difference.
So I would do maybe like 10 to 15 minutes.
Everyone in this room grew up Muslim but made the decision to leave the religion. They call themselves ex-Muslims. So you're going to be doing you're going to be headlining a comedy night. Comedy and apostasy doesn't normally go
no, they
in
don't.
the same sentence.
And I think it's a very scary mix in a lot of ways. I'm actually fearing a little bit of a backlash on it.
People don't call themselves ex-Jews or ex-Christians. Why are we calling ourselves ex-Muslims? And to be quite honest, I wouldn't necessarily call myself an ex-Muslim before we started the organisation. I would call myself an atheist.
It's a strange concept, a support group for recovering Muslims. So I've come here to find out why they feel the need to meet up, what it means to them and their families to have left Islam, and why almost everyone insists I change their name before they'll talk to me.
There are a wide range of reasons why people don't necessarily feel comfortable saying that they've left Islam. It could be you just don't want to disappoint your family.
My mum has no idea. My dad has an idea, but he's not ready to, kind of accept it to himself, really.
There are a few people who have to wear niqab when they go out.
So there are people who wear the niqab in public, but actually don't believe?
Yeah, they're made to by their parents.
It feels very conflicting, it feels very stifling, and it's something I don't think I can keep up.
I'm not religious. I'm Muslims and I'm agnostic. I'm not Christian. I'm just agnostic.
The ex-Muslims meet-up I've gate-crashed meets once a month. On the evening I went, there were 10 men and 2 women. Most are professionals, most are in their 20s and 30s. Some have come recently from Iran, Pakistan and elsewhere. Others grew up here. One of those taking part is Imtiaz, who's 42 and works in the city.
I grew up in London. It was a Shiite background. I'd say it was pretty traditional. My parents prayed 5 times a day. They made sure I read the Quran by about age 8 or 9. Not understanding it, but just read the Arabic. They was hoping I would grow up religious, same as them. Hope I'd have an arranged marriage by my mid-20s, say.
Where did it all go wrong for you then? When did you sort of start straying from these expectations?
In the same way as I kind of grew out of other stuff that you grow out of in childhood. I felt God was just one of those things that I was just growing out of. And I couldn't really understand why my parents... Well, my father died when I was quite young. I couldn't understand why my parents actually went along with it until I saw that everyone else was doing it. So there was a kind of one-upmanship between Asian families. This was a kind of social cohesion, a kind of social glue that was holding this sort of culture together.
Everyone in my family wore a headscarf or a veil. We went to Islamic school in the evenings. Everyone prayed.
Aisha is 23, born and brought up in a Bangladeshi family in East London.
I was quite actually non-religious as a child, as in it didn't make sense to me, although I had to go on with a lot of the rituals.
Do you think you were the only one for whom this was happening?
As far as I know, but then no one knows that I don't believe in it anymore, so you never know, there might be others.
Do you have siblings?
Yes, I have younger siblings.
So when you were having this kind of process of disenchantment, were you able to discuss it with anyone?
I did try. There were a few things, for example, that would come out of sermons or a few rulings that I would criticise, but as soon as I started doing that, I was kind of told, well, that's religion and you can't argue with it, so I kind of stopped trying to...
What was triggering this?
I think what I just realised as I grew older was that my own version of morality in the world differed a lot from what my understanding of the Islamic version was. So, for example, we did a debate in school once, I remember, where we were asked whether we thought gay marriage should be allowed. And my immediate, gut instinct was, well, of course it should be. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And kind of everyone was a bit like, oh, you can't say that, And for a while I tried to kind of live with both of those views. So I tried to live with what my own version was and what I felt the religious version was, until eventually I couldn't do it much longer.
Among the folks in the pub, the person I was most surprised to see was Aziz. He's 23 and lives in East London, and he was the only person in the group to have a beard, which made him look a bit more religious than the others. In fact, Aziz was a Haji, meaning he had memorized the entire Quran by heart.
Took me 5 years. I started when I was 12 and finished when I was 17.
So I remember reading the Quran at 9, 10, and I was told that if you you become Hafiz, you have an automatic entry to heaven.
You and 10 family members.
So you've got a free pass with plus 10.
Yeah, pretty much. But if it doesn't mean anything to you inside, it's sort of pointless.
How do you go from being somebody who is one of the 0.01% of Muslims who actually memorise the whole thing to actually not believing in any of it?
Oh, when I was in college is when I first started questioning. A friend of mine, he was questioning as well, so he kept asking me questions, and I'd never answer him because I never really would have an answer.
So you're in late teens when you sort of...
Yeah, it was late teens. It was 18, 19.
Who knows about it?
No one in my family, none at all.
And how much of an intersection is there between your family and your social/private life then?
Not much really. They're pretty separate.
So you're basically living in two different worlds then?
Yeah, it's a big double life, but that would have been insane if I didn't have it.
Yes, well, I haven't told them. I haven't told my family.
You haven't told them?
No.
So you're 42 now?
Yes. Well, it's just my mother left now, and I don't really see what would be gained from telling her. Religion is so wound up in her own identity. She wouldn't be able to comprehend what atheism actually is. I don't think she actually understands it. So I don't really see what's to be gained now.
So do you pretend when you're with her then?
Yes. Yes, I do.
How do you pretend?
Well, I don't... Very rarely I will pray with her, or pretend to pray. I'll take her to the mosque when she wants to go. Fasting, again, I'll pretend to fast.
How do you pretend to fast?
Well, you eat when she's not looking.
You've actually done that?
Yeah.
So she thinks that you're taking part in Ramadan, and then when her back's turned, you stuff your face.
I don't stuff my face. That would give things away. I certainly drink water because I don't think it's not a good idea not to drink water. But I will also show some solidarity with her by not eating much.
When I visit them, I wear a headscarf and I try to wear looser clothing. I used to wear a jilbab, and they're still quite unhappy that I have taken that off.
And so the jilbab is the complete...
The jilbab is the long, loose robe. I also used to wear a face veil for a very short period of time. They're not too bothered about the face veil, but they're very unhappy that I don't wear the long cloak. So it's the long cloak that covers your whole body.
Who knows?
It's been a few years since I realised I don't believe. So now, at the moment, one of my siblings knows. A few family members know. Not uncles or aunts. A few kind of more cousins. Extended. Yes, more extended family members know. All of my friends and everyone else knows. So it's just the core family remaining that I keep it a secret from.
And when you say you keep it a secret, when you go home, do you basically act as if you still have the faith?
Yes, so I wake up for Tahajjud, I pray Fajr, I pray the 5 daily prayers, I teach my little sister all the mosque stuff that she's learning.
What price do you think you're going to have to pay, initially at least, for revealing the truth?
I don't particularly want to reveal the truth. I think it will just come out at some point because we disagree about so much. But I already know what the price is because I've explicitly been told it. I know that I will automatically be disowned by my father. I will never be able to visit the family home again.
It is difficult. It's very difficult to lose your family.
Back with the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain, Mahakma is talking to the group about the price she paid for revealing her lack of faith to her family. She was born in Denver to a Pakistani family and decided that she had to tell her family that she was no longer a believer. Here she remembers her father's reaction.
You have been ashamed of the family. I don't want to be associated with you. You're not my daughter anymore. He had these weird ideas about how women lose themselves in their purity and their dignity, and they climb into this thing that he called the pit of shame, and that's what he thought I just flung myself into. And he says, he really truly believes that I don't really have a life to live.
But is this related to Islam?
It's influenced by it, for sure. I think that these concepts of dignity and honor and purity and virginity definitely were influenced by Islamic principles.
Has it been worth it?
I think it has. And it's really hard to say that but I couldn't live the double life, and I think it sounds so cliche, but we really, really have to live this life, and you have to do good with it. And if that means that you have to make sacrifices, or that you have to let go of people that, you know, especially your parents that you thought would be in your life forever, then you have to. Really it's difficult. Like, you know, my law school graduation is coming up, and I get this invite from the school that says, you know, bring your parents, they should be super proud of you. And I didn't tell her that I don't have my parents anymore. I've tried to reach out to them. I've tried to send them messages and phone calls to say, hey, Mom and Dad, we really, you know, need to resolve our differences, or at least just accept who we are, and I want you to just be proud of who I am. And this radio silent. You know, I feel like Islam took my family from me. You know, it just robbed me of that relationship that I could have had with my mother and with my father. You know, so there's a lot of that animosity as well, personally.
You know, I've had problems like he had, but then I've grown a beard, and people have mistaken me for a Muslim, and I found that very, you know, embarrassing.
Although all the ex-Muslims have turned away from Islam, there were differing levels of hostility towards the religion. One man was so angry with Islam, he'd even changed his name.
I know, from Kamil Rizvi to Alexander David Paul. So,
and that's actually by deed poll?
By deed poll, yeah.
So that is your name?
Yeah, that's my name now.
Does anyone use that name?
Well, everyone's going to start using it, because I'm going to start, you know, making it official. I'm going to tell my employer what my new name is, and they'll have to change all the paperwork, and I'll go from Kamil to Alex. You know,
the reason for that is?
I always hated my name. I never, you know, it's a Muslim now. I'm not a Muslim, so why should I? Why should I have? It's logic. You know, it's just, you know.
I think he's changed his name because he's ashamed of the fact that he was born into a Muslim family, and it's an inferiority complex. I think in a way he wishes he was white.
My name associated with Islam. All Arab is language of Islam. Any Arab name is bound to.
I would generally avoid having Muslim friends, or even brown friends. Isn't
that quite an outrageous thing to say?
No, I'll explain why. Because of uncomfortable conversations. I mean, I didn't shun them. And I did have some, but they wouldn't become my close friends because awkward conversations and the things I like to do weren't things that they generally like to do.
That's just racism, isn't it?
No, it's not racism.
Are you not just totally judging over a billion people and saying they're not going to really like the same things that I like?
No, it's not as if I'm speaking to a Muslim and saying I'm not going to be your friend. It's what happens.
Saying to somebody who's brown that I'm not going to be your friend.
It's what actually happens is this person and me may well get on, but we're not going to we're not going to hit it off to the same extent that I would do with a non-Muslim, just because of the awkward conversations.
What awkward conversations would that be?
About religion and this idea. You know, I would feel awkward and uncomfortable because I was living a lie, and these were people who, in my eyes, weren't living a lie.
So, the people that you meet in the ex-Muslims group are part of a very small, select number of brown people that you could imagine being friends with.
Absolutely, yes. They were people who not only could I be friends with if they weren't brown, but they also had that added quality of being able to relate to my life, my childhood, and everything else. All the things that I really missed, all the things that I didn't have when I was growing up.
Okay, you know, you don't like to be a Muslim. Okay, you know, you're not a Muslim. I realise that, but hating
when you get together, how structured are the conversations? Is it just about whatever's on your mind? How often do you meet up?
It's never very particularly structured, because it's they're a very, very difficult bunch to control, as you can imagine. We've got 120 people, many of which are in the closet, many of which aren't in the closet. And it's just people who share.
When you say that, you mean in terms of they're not publicly known to be ex-Muslims amongst their family and their loved ones?
Correct, yeah. We use the same terminology as the gay movement I still use.
Self-consciously you do that as a sort of active decision?
Yes, it's deliberate, because I think it feels very similar. It feels like there's a part of you that you want to express that isn't, you're not being allowed to express. You're not being allowed to be who you are.
No. What you should say is I disagree with this by saying...
If there was a hidden mic in the ex-Muslims group meetup,
Yes.
and the sound of what was going on was played back to your family,
Yes.
what would they think?
Oh God, I think they'd think I've gone off the rails. I mean, just because of the discussion, and they'd obviously hear glasses clinking and things like that. And in terms of the discussion, yeah, they would really be unhappy with maybe what I say or the things that I reveal there. So yeah, they would be a bit devastated.
What does being in that group give you?
First of all, it gave me a space where I could express all that and where people understood that. But it also made me realise that I'm not alone, because at the moment where you first realise you don't believe in Islam, at least for me, it felt like the most unthinkable thing in the world. I kept trying to pretend I believed, even to myself, because it was inconceivable. You know, like nobody ever leaves Islam, even if you're a liberal Muslim or you're not that practicing. So I felt like I was the first. That sounds really silly, but at the time it felt very isolating. It felt like I was the first, I used to say, atheist agnostic Muslim in the world.
For those who've left Islam, the dangers and threats might not just come from their family. Mariam Namazi is from the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain.
I mean, I think the threat is very real. I mean, I've gotten death threats from Islamists, particularly because of the Islamic movement that is in existence, you know, across in many cities and countries across the globe.
And are there examples of people who have stepped away from Islam who have then paid a price for that?
There are some very high-profile cases that we know of. People like Taslima Nasreen, for example. People like Mina Ahadi, who started the Council of Ex-Muslims in Germany.
What happened?
Well, they've received death threats as a result, you know. And there are people who are still being hung for apostasy in various countries.
Where?
Like in Iran, for example.
One thing I kept hearing from the ex-Muslims is that the punishment for apostasy in Islam is death. I wanted to know if it was quite as cut and dried as that. Usama Hassan is an imam and a senior researcher at the Muslim think tank, the Quilliam Foundation.
The Quran is very clear in two places that there is no compulsion in religion, la ikraha fi din. And in fact, the first time that verse occurs is after the greatest verse of the Quran, which is the verse of the throne, Ayatul Kursi. So it's a very fundamental religious principle which is set out there in the Quran. What definitely happened later in Islamic history was a law against apostasy developed, and there were various hadith teaching of the Prophet which were quoted to support that, and some of them are very explicit. They say whoever changes their religion, kill them, and if a Muslim leaves their faith, they have to be killed. And in medieval Islam, I think it's true to say for a good 1,000 years, all the major schools of Islamic law, including the 4 or 5 or 6 major Sunni schools and the major Shia schools, they all taught that apostates, or people who leave the faith, should be killed. The only disagreement was whether or not it applies to women as well as men, and also whether it was especially because of treason for political reasons. And what's happening now is, over the last century, a lot of Muslim scholars have looked at this issue again and argued that that original teaching of no compulsion in religion is universal, and that the later rules were to do with treason.
In terms of the global picture, what is the global situation like for people if they challenge Islam or want to leave it in Islamic countries right now?
The global picture is pretty bleak because precisely of this medieval Islamic jurisprudence, which still influences religious establishments and seminaries across the Muslim world. You know, most traditional seminaries that I'm familiar with in this country, India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, and all the major centres of Muslim learning still teach medieval jurisprudence. So they still regularly teach that apostates or people who leave the faith have to be killed. And there are many laws in Muslim majority countries which discriminate against people who leave the faith.
Ali lived in Pakistan for 8 years, and he and others in the group have felt the pressure of losing the faith in predominantly Muslim countries.
It's very hard to say that you're not a Muslim because, you know, even when you say you're like a Muslim but you're like Shia instead of a Sunni, they'll really hate you for being a Shia. So saying that you don't really believe in Allah altogether, it's very extreme. And if you say anything against Islam or anything against like the Prophet or Allah, you get charged with like blasphemy laws, you know, something like that in Pakistan, which is very dangerous.
I don't even consider myself as a Muslim to begin with, but I was forced to be one. Atheism for people of my race is a very taboo thing. That's actually what brought me here, and seeing what happened to people that have got in trouble with the authority and the active witch hunting. Actually, I was under so much pressure that I had the option whether suicide or asylum.
Our message is, yes, we will leave. Watch us, we are leaving, and we will continue to leave. It's the right of people to leave. It's not about being anti-Muslim or even necessarily being anti-Islam. It's about saying that people have a right to leave religion if they want and to choose to be atheists if they want, without feeling intimidated and feeling threatened.
And what about those people who say that your interpretation of Islam is just one interpretation and there's another strain which is tolerant, which is open, which is not judgmental, and it's unfair to to tar Islam with a particular strain of interpretation?
I mean, I agree. I think religion is a belief, and so it depends on how each person interprets their beliefs. I think in general, people are decent and they interpret their beliefs to meet 21st century values and lives. But I think there's a difference between that, religion as a private matter, to religion in the public space, in politics, in the state, in the law, in the educational system. They become very different things, and then it's not really about religion as a personal belief anymore. It's about political power, and it is used as a way of controlling.
But we're not living in a theocracy in Britain.
No, we're not living in a theocracy. But coming from Iran myself and having fought the Islamic regime for several decades, I was thrown off my feet at the fear that British-born people feel in this country, to say that they're ex-Muslims, to say that they've left Islam, to say that they're atheists. So that, Islamism is there. This is not a theocracy, but Islamism is a global movement.
Mariam was not the only one to be surprised by the religious fervour she found on arrival in Britain. Alan Murad came to the UK from a Muslim country, Turkmenistan.
When I came here, it was a major shock. There are Muslims all around me who are far more religious than anyone I've met back in Turkmenistan. My high school was in Southall, so you can imagine that we had a strong Asian community. I was aware enough that this was not representative of Britain as a whole. And then when you experience the level of devotion that the British Muslim community have, it is incredible in comparison. They have themselves been left their countries of origin, and they probably do feel alienated by it, and this is a strong source of solidarity and self-actualization for them.
I'm not living in an area which has a lot of Muslims. If I were living in East London, or maybe Bradford, or maybe Birmingham, then yes, I would feel a bit unsafe saying I'm not a Muslim in somewhere like Island Rock, maybe.
It is sad that people are fearful.
Osama Hassan from the Quilliam Foundation again.
I'm familiar in this country with Muslims who had left the faith being harassed, intimidated, especially if they overtly became members of another faith community, such as Christianity. I mean, there was a Pakistani chap in Birmingham some years ago who openly became Christian, and he had people throwing bricks through his windows, attacking him while he was picking up his primary school children from school, etc., simply because they felt he had betrayed them. And I totally understand how people in that situation would need a safe space.
Not everyone feels quite so vulnerable. Amam lives in London.
Yeah, I do feel safe. 2 of my best friends are Muslims, and I've known them since I was 11 years old. They know all of my views, and I tell Muslims that I'm an atheist, and I don't feel threatened. In London, I'm sitting here in a BBC studio saying I'm an atheist ex-Muslim. I'm on Facebook, use my real name, and I criticise the religion. There isn't really anything to be scared of in terms of, being attacked physically. I don't think that's going to happen in this country. I do feel they judge me, though, and I can tell from their expressions that they do judge me. Sometimes when I say I'm an ex-Muslim to a Muslim, they look at me like I'm a ghost or an alien, because they have never thought of the possibility of leaving Islam themselves, and they don't think it's something that happens. And to be honest, that's the main reason I'm here today, because I want this country to know that ex-Muslims exist, and there's more of us than people think.
If you read the Bible, it's all about God. You are God's chosen people. Religions are you can go anywhere and do whatever the hell you like.
It's all about converting the world.
I think definitely other religions are doing the same thing, and they always have done. I don't like to point to Islam and say, you know, this is an evil cult that's masquerading as a religion, like some people do. I think it's just another religion that maybe people these days take more seriously than the Christians do with their religion. Because it's obvious that a lot of these ex-Muslims, they can't be out and open to everyone they know and to their families. They can't talk freely about their thoughts and opinions and beliefs with many people who would judge them and who would try to change them. So everyone, I think, needs friends to talk to about what they think and what they believe.
You know, Muslims is very...
I don't know, I don't hate Muslims, but, you know, but I don't like the ideology.
No, but 600 years ago, you could make the exact same points as a Muslim about Christianity. That they're more aggressive and the Muslims are so...
That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight. Losing my religion. Trying to keep up.
Because it starts at 7 and then the flyer says at 8 is when we're going to start the comedy.
Back in the Fleet Street pub, the meeting is coming to an end. The debates go on as this Friday's Ex-Muslims comedy night draws close.
We have stories, you know, and I think comedy has always been a way to share that story in a very non-intimidating, relaxed environment.
But aren't these stories filled with pain, rejection and betrayal?
They have, but I think most comedians have that, right?
So tell me about your mum telling you that he was everywhere and the like.
So now you're getting into one of my jokes, but I'll explain it to you. One of the things that really struck me, and I still remember from childhood, I would say, you know, Allah is light. And that was one of the big things I remember. Allah is light, Allah is everywhere. As a kid, we try to come up with very clever ways to combat that. So I locked myself in the closet for 3 hours.
Yeah, I've already written some parts of it. I mean, I can actually send it to you, and then
you know what? Work on it, and you can do like your routine can be a joke or two, and then go. I just think it'd be great for you to tell your story, and I think it'd be that would be awesome.